Hi, everybody. Welcome to the July 2018 edition of the Paul Crouse Show on the Star Nations Radio Network, where we talk with a broad range of international guests about living life better and making a difference in our rapidly changing world. Today, I'll be talking with my good friend and Star Nations co-founder, Neshi Lokotz, and the title of our show is How Do We Break the Political Polarization? We'll get to that in just a minute. But before we start our conversation, I want to say a little bit about myself. My name is Paul Crouse. I'm a life coach, spiritual teacher, and advisor based here in Kyoto, Japan. I help people want to consciously change their lives and help them solve their problems and sort out their insides and figure out where it is they want to go and help them get there. I do this worldwide via internet video calling or face-to-face here in Kyoto, Japan. You can reach me at my website, which is paulcrouse.com. That's Crouse with a C, C-R-O-U-S-E. So take a look there. And if you get a chance, make sure to have a listen to some of the other great shows we have on the Star Nations network here. Just go to, you can listen to shows live or at any time. Just go to the archive at starnations.org. And you can find lots of other great content there. And you can listen to any of my past shows on my website, which is paulcrouse.com. And just click on Talk Show. All right, and make sure to stick around for Julie Hedges' Tarot Journey show, which will be on right after the show. So, without further ado, let's say hi to Neshi, and I have to put her online here. Let's make sure I'm doing this right. Oh, I'll go off of solo.
Just click on the solo.
There it is.
There we are.
Hey, Neshi, how are you?
Pretty good. I'm sharing the show. 1 second. For joining
okay, we're doing this.
There. I wanted to share the show.
So, for those who don't know, where are you located?
I'm in Tomah, Wisconsin, USA. I live about an hour east of the Mississippi in the state of Wisconsin, in the northwestern part.
Okay, sort of between La Crosse and Madison on, what is that, 94?
Actually, yes. Well, I am between La Crosse and Madison. I'm about 3.5 hours from Chicago and 3.5 hours from the Twin Cities.
Okay. And I'm in Kyoto, Japan, which is about an hour north of Osaka on the other side of the globe. All right. So it's a real scorcher here today. It's going to be about 100 degrees. So I hope it's not too, I hope I don't start baking in this room. The air conditioner should hold out during the show. Okay. So we haven't talked in a while, Neshi. What you're laughing?
Well, actually, I've been quite busy with getting the July issue of the magazine, Star Nations magazine, published on the 10th, and so we're just past that and doing all the promotions for it now.
Okay.
So yeah, Star Nations organization keeps me quite busy, and I just got off a weekend, a girlfriends weekend.
Okay.
Everybody came here, so we had a blast.
Okay, great. And just out of curiosity, what's the weather like?
Well, we had beautiful weather today, sunny, low humidity, which is a blessing. And it was only about 85 degrees.
Oh, okay. That's nice. That's like the low here.
When I got up this morning, it was 67 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. All right. Wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes to grasp that when I just keep thinking to myself, hey, there's no snow.
Exactly.
Although it is pretty hot outside for here.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say in just probably 5 or 6 months, we could easily have 30 below zero with the wind chill. So I don't ever complain about warm weather.
There you go. There you go. So now I'm talking to you, and the cheesehead accent's coming out. So.
You never lose it.
I used to live in Wisconsin up in a little town called Shawano, and then I went to school in La Crosse and Madison. So sometimes I would go to Shawano for the weekend, come back to college, and my friends were like, how come you're talking like that, Paul?
How come you're talking like that for?
How come you're talking like that? I haven't heard it in a while, so it's a little bit. Anyway, so today's segueing back to what the subject for today is how to break the political polarization.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been living in Japan for 23 years.
Yeah.
So my observation of what's going on in the States is different than those who are in the States. So I'm sometimes shocked and amazed at what's going on multiple levels. But it seems to be now politics is something we don't really talk a whole lot about here in Star Nations, which is perfect.
Really.
But we all have to live on this planet together, and that's a spiritual thing. I mean, that's part of. I mean, great. A lot of the great leaders, social leaders, like Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, he was a religious person, right?
Yes.
So, or Nelson Mandela, while he wasn't he wasn't particularly a spiritual. He wasn't like a priest or anything. He was a spiritual person, and trying to free people from many things, their inner world, and just what's going on in the outer world. I mean, Gandhi's an amazing man.
Right.
And I look at what's going on in the States, and I'm kind of shaking my head. A lot of times going, I leave the country for a couple of decades. What have you guys done? Jeez.
I know. And actually, I've had the same response. I have had, the thing is, like, I can't hear his voice anymore. Can't.
What, he who shan't be named?
45. I call him 45. Because he is.
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about politics. So one of our goals in this conversation, although we can fess up to what's going on, but it appears to be in America, actually it's not just America, it's around the world. There's like this divide from one side or the other, and right and left is not particularly the right vocabulary to use for this. There's a right, because the right and the left, that's old vocabulary going back to the French Revolution, right?
Yes.
There's a variant of it, but it's a much more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. But there's this divide. It's kind of about half and half, and people nowadays, it seems nobody wants to actually have a conversation. They just kind of want to scream at each other and I'm right, you suck, kind of thing.
Right.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and I think the problem with some of that is the way that we get our information. Mm-hmm. Because you're right, it is very divisive. There is this gap, and it's not just a generational gap or a socioeconomic gap. It's the gap in basic beliefs, I think. Mm-hmm. And part of the problem, I think, is understanding each other's point of view when you're not really getting facts. Okay. It's right. It's not based in facts. It's based in innuendos and what ifs, and somebody's stirring, the pot up. And so, and basically, for my 2 cents is that it has to do with ratings many times. And so you really have to have, I think, a broader spectrum of where you get your news from, so that you can see it from different perspectives. And I know you said that you've been in Japan for 23 years. Mm-hmm. And so here in the States, we have a very narrow path to information through media, and especially when you're talking about, in our childhood, in our young adulthood, it was like CBS, NBC, the bigger stations, right? And I really think that it's kind of a narrow, because if you take a wider perspective and bring in different kind of avenues of information, you get to kind of see a different pattern forming, or at least you have different information coming in. And what I'm talking about is, more independent news sources from all over the world, really. So that's...
No, go ahead. Well, I used to be in the news business, and so I have my degrees in journalism. Whilst I was a photographer, when I worked at our college newspaper as managing editor of the paper, and I'm actually quite interested in politics, and I actually know quite a bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons some people kind of push me in that direction, I know enough about it to say, no. Yeah, it's like hold the hand grenade in your hand with the pin pulled out. Okay, and you're holding it.
Yeah.
Well, we live in a time of rapidly accelerating change. Yes. Okay, and this is a huge important part of it. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy who I read a book that I read in college. It totally changed my worldview. It was a guy named Alvin Toffler, and he was most famous for a book called Future Shock that was in the 60s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
70s. And what he was talking about is this world of rapidly accelerating change, and he was trying to describe it. And he was basically saying that the world we're going through a change now as great as the Industrial Revolution, mm-hmm. Starting in the 1750s. And previous to that, the Great Revolution was the Agricultural Revolution in the Neolithic, when people, moved from hunter-gatherers to settling in the river valleys.
Right.
And he spends a lot of time in the book explaining, well, what is industrial society? And he describes it. And then he talks about how it was falling apart. Mm-hmm. And he wrote this book in around 1980. And in the book, he predicts that, for example, the breakup of the Soviet Union from just the model that he creates. Mm-hmm. His argument is that the structures of the industrial age are falling apart basically because they can't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? So things like governments or large bureaucracy is mm-hmm. a product of the industrial age. So people complain about the government, and if you go to a government office, you got to fill in these forms, then you got to go over there, and then you got to go over there. So is it, okay, this is the state forms, and these are the local forms, and these are the federal forms, or if you're like in Europe, it's like, oh my God, they created yet another government, the European Union, and these guys in Brussels who don't know anything about me, and I didn't elect them, and why do I have to worry about this stuff if I'm in Greece and it's in Latvia, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So people get frustrated by that, and it's understandable, mm-hmm. right? I mean, yes. If you've ever had to pull your hair out from
that would happen.
I think it was DNA, but
okay.
In testosterone. But ever had to pull your hair out with dealing with bureaucracy and red tape? Yes. It's really easy to see why people get frustrated.
Yes.
But I also think so. You're talking about when we were kids growing up. There was these large media corporations that controlled the information.
Yep.
Okay. But also people like in the news business, our job was we were trained to gather information and confirm information, disseminate it. Okay. Mm-hmm. But all my friends that used to work in the news business, almost all of them don't anymore because the newspapers died.
Right.
So the Grand Rapids Press, which I used to work for, they had about 900 employees. I think they have like less than 50 now. And most of those guys are like in the printing press. I mean, we had a huge newsroom, and we went out and sat in township board meetings. Yeah. It might not have been exciting, but somebody has to know, for example, that sewage system they're putting in, like mm-hmm. a local municipality, that's one of the most expensive things they do is your water system.
Yeah.
And why is the township board chairman's cousin getting the contract?
Right.
Somebody needs to know that, right?
Right. Yes.
It seems simple and it seems boring, but somebody needs to gather this information. But now with the internet, we get mm-hmm. all these different kinds of information, and we're not really trained how to judge this information, whether it's good or not.
Right.
Okay. And then there's a whole industries of just being political about it.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
I mean, and being very partisan, and seriously, the rise of the right-wing media in the States mm-hmm. is actually really poisoned things a lot. And that had to do with laws that were changed. The FCC changed laws in the 1980s during the Reagan and Bush years that mm-hmm. allowed them to.
Yeah. In fact,
it allowed there to be equal time law.
Yeah. I was just kind of scrolling through the comments, and Bob Kendall actually kind of mentioned that about they're chatting it up in there, and I lost it. He mentioned something about the Reagan era and about the change in the FCC, and that's so true. I mean, there was a time where I think it's also about trust, because there was a time when most people understood how the journalists brought in the information, that they were asking pointed questions. They were trying to get to the facts of the matter, and that's what they were reporting, investigating, really looking at
good journalists did, yes.
Good journalism, right? And I think that has evolved in many ways into so far away from that, where it's really based on opinion or loose facts into opinion, or even just plain politics,
Well, there's that, and it's like the business model for like Fox News. Mm-hmm. Their overhead is really tiny. Mm-hmm. They don't actually, it's not even actually a news organization. They don't really have reporters, or very few. They don't have bureaus around the world. If you have a bunch of talking heads, you got to pay them, but you don't have to pay overhead for, having a bureau in Johannesburg,
right,
or in Rio.
Right.
So part of it is economic, and then the power element of it. And before, the media sucked. let's be honest with it.
I'll just be plain.
No, it was. There was just garbage.
Right, because I can't hardly even watch them. So I get my news from many different sources. I'd like to do some of the corporate, just to see what's being said, and I don't do it all day long either. I bop in and say what's going on, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. BuzzFeed News, the Young Turks. I like to be able to, a BBC, a smattering of this and that, so that when I take a look at the picture of whatever is going on, that it's I have more pieces to it than just one single source, is what I'm trying to say.
Good. I get the New York Times every day and read that, and then do a variety of other stuff. But I try to hear from different sources. What?
I was going to say in News and Guts.
Okay. And by the way, this is the old school.
Yeah. Oh, the actual paper.
Actually, because I read it online and with the paper, it's a different experience with the paper, because they where they put things is different.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
No, just how it's presented to you, because this is one of the things we learned in college. I used to actually, in Madison, we put together the newspaper every single day, and then in the old days, we actually cut and paste, you cut and you pasted it on, and photographed it before it was fully. But how you present, where the stories go, and blah 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 blah, makes a difference. And so there's stories on here that are presented differently than on the
digital version.
Story here this is about children in detention centers in the United States. Which is, oh my God, really? Yeah. They're doing this?
If there's any one topic that is emotionally charged on both sides, all the sides, not just two, all of them, is around the immigration and about the children. Mm-hmm. Really, I've witnessed it where, family members, opposite sides of the situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And immigration is an old. Did you ever see the movie The Gangs of New York?
Yes.
Bill the Butcher, right? That part of this.
It's part of the history. Mm-hmm.
You think? Yeah, that this has always been part of the American experience, and then it's like the heathen hordes from Ireland. Let's kill them all, right? So this is. Goes back to
the 1400s.
It goes back to Cain and Abel. if you're into your Christian mythology, right? So
I was actually more concerned about the indigenous history.
Okay, yeah. Well, yes, yeah. The indigenous people killed each other too. So
no,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that from my belief system, right, is that if we don't learn the lessons, if we don't grow spiritually from it, we tend to repeat
course.
it over and over and over until we get it, right? And so,
or we get guilt.
And then you get to come back and maybe do it again someplace else, right? And so, yeah, and I think that a lot of this is repeating itself historically.
Sure. I mean, actually, there's a lot of parallels to the 1930s, and this is what the problem with talking about this is. People are like, oh, everybody's used the word Nazi and Hitler against just about everybody.
Yeah.
So it's like crying wolf. With the one time that it is
down that same street,
people are like, yeah, he's Nazi again, or my friend said he was trying to compare. What'd you call him? 45.
Mm-hmm.
He who shan't be named. He goes, it's not. He goes, everybody talks about Hitler. It's just think more like Mussolini, but without the fashion sense.
Or the accent.
He had stylish uniforms for his brown shirts to beat the crap out of people. So let's bring it back. So I'm going to fess up. I'm a Democrat, and I voted for Hillary Clinton, and I actually voted for Hillary Clinton in the primaries. I was a supporter of her. I don't think she's a saint, but she was a center left person, which more of a pragmatist with a lot of experience. That was my thing. Now, other people disagree. That's totally fine, but that's just, I'm going to fess up. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not hiding behind this fake illusion that there's equivalence.
Right.
But
yes,
I also think it's important to listen to other people's points of view. Because if we're talking about spirit stuff, there's spirit and ego. Ego's like, I'm always right. Of course. You suck.
Listen to me.
Right. And so ultimately, when you see someone like Donald Trump, he's the ultimate of that just ego.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it appears to be what's behind I have no idea what's behind the curtain. Is it what you look at, or if it's or not?
Right.
I think most people agree on about 85 to 95% of things in life. That there's a relatively small area where we disagree.
Yes.
And if you have the way that the political partisan conversations go is where they're picking on that last, say, 10%, 10, 15% that we don't agree on. And they, no matter what side you're on, they have these keywords that they use, So I met this British woman, and I sat in a taxi cab with her in Thailand for like more than an hour, and she just kept going, yes, the Islamization of Europe. Yes, the Islamization of Europe. It's like, yes, you listen to Rupert Murdoch. So she's like going all on. It's like all this. It's all the Muslims' fault, the immigrants' fault.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe. Maybe the Muslims are kind of angry because we invaded their countries and bombed them a lot, and the British, like, we have a little bit of a history of taking all the resources and leaving them with garbage. I mean, that has a little bit to do with it, But I didn't go there because I knew as soon as I got in that, as soon as I would get into that, it's just that we're going to take a polar sides, and it's like very predictable. They're going to say this, and I'm going to say this, and I want to say, blah, 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 and then nothing happens.
Right.
So how do we get past that?
Oh, that is because it's so emotionally charged, and I think that all right, this is what I do. Because you were very upfront of your where you are politically, and I am more of an independent with some Democrat overlays to that, right? And I voted for Jill Stein, so I heard from my relatives who are most of them are Republicans. I don't figure that out, but and the others that are Democrats, and they're saying, well, you just threw your vote away. And I said, okay, first of all, it's my vote. It's not your vote. It's my vote.
Oh,
and
there you go.
And I said, and it's okay. You can vote how you want to vote. I voted for Jill because of the environment situation. And I said, I liked her platform about that. I did not like the platform of blah, blah, blah. But what I have to do in those situations is I have to make sure that I'm grounded. That I am balanced and grounded. So I take some deep breaths and I just get, okay.
Being grounded when you're having the conversation with
while I'm having the ground
or
yeah.
whomever.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because that way, the emotional piece isn't ricocheting all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing I do is I get grounded and I listen. I might not agree with their point of view, but I listen. And sometimes I hear things that I'll ask them more about. It's like, really, how did you know that? Could you just explain that piece to me? Because that it's your point of view, and I want to make sure I understand it. And so I'm listening to them, and so they're talking a lot. I'm usually the one just, okay, well, all right, I don't really agree with that, but keep going. And the thing is that at some point we start talking about the emotions and the feelings.
Okay.
How does that make you feel? When you think that or heard that, how did it make you feel? And especially with the immigration stuff, asking about, well, how do you feel about children in general? Just children. Not where they're from or the color of their skin or if they speak English or not. How do you feel about children? Do you feel that children should be safe? Do you feel that children should be with their parents? Just trying to get to the point where we're there's points that we agree on. We agree on, and the points that we don't agree on. It doesn't have to be volatile. It doesn't have to have the toxic kind of stuff coming at it, and you always run into those few people who would prefer to be yelling at you as they're doing this. It's like, so you take a step away and lower your voice so you're not yelling at them too. But sometimes you just have to walk away too. It's like, oh, I guess we're just going to have to disagree,
Well, yeah, definitely. Agreeing to disagree, but finding those points of a connection, bringing things down to humanity, because also one of the reasons of this horrible propaganda that some of these people are spewing out, this just absolute, just hateful garbage, is they're dehumanizing people.
Yes.
You're dehumanizing people so that we can. So, for example, the government, the United States government, kills lots of people through drone strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Not talked about very much in the American media, but there's people in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan who are afraid of the sky because they're sitting there and suddenly this massive Hellfire missile comes down and destroys the neighborhood. Yeah, maybe it kills a legitimate target, but then collateral damage. Means people died because they just happened to be in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It's this rocket. So we don't talk about that. So this is part of the information. But doesn't everybody sort of have that right to life and liberty? And isn't it? Why is it that a person of brown color or a person on the other side of the world, if they die, we don't cry about it, but someone in the neighborhood dies and we cry about it?
Yeah, I think that it has to do with when it's in your neighborhood, it affects you.
Yeah, because you know the person.
Because you know the person, you know the house, you know the street, you know it. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about somebody that's halfway around the world or in a different state in the United States, it's in Texas. It's not here in Wisconsin, so why are we even worried about it? kind of thing. But,
or you'll see, like, the thing is, like, there'll be a terrorist strike in Europe and people will put on Facebook, they'll put the flag, that's the French flag or the Belgian flag. That's fine as solidarity. But, then there's a terrorist strike in Istanbul, which is still Europe. It's not Europe. It's half Europe, half Asia, but that's a major city, right? Mm-hmm. Why aren't you putting the Turkish flag there? Why is this? So this is a tribalism, this rise of tribalisms. And we
did a show about that, you and I.
Okay.
About tribalism. I don't know if you remember that. It was the beginning of the year. And that tribalism. And the thing is that, from a tribal point of view, because that's how I grew up, is that there is a sense of belonging. Now, in my, I remember there was an elder who was talking to some 20-year-olds, and gang members kind of thing. And he's saying, I just don't understand why you have to go over there to join the gang when you're already in a gang. And they're going, what? It's called your tribe. It's called your clan. We have our own colors. We have our own language. We have our own signs, and what he was trying to do was tell them that gang membership, if you want to belong, you already have some place to belong.
But they probably feel that they don't.
Right.
Yeah. And this is also part of the modern world, is a lot of those social structures have gone.
Yes.
Family, the community, and people, we talked about this before too, is we get isolated. And we talked about this with Francis also, the psychiatrist, people feel really isolated in the modern world. And we're bombarded by this information coming through the computer, whether it's this overt political stuff or the relentless advertising brainwashing, as you must feel like crap unless you buy our product.
Yes.
Or whatever. I mean, so getting back to what I think, democracy, if we want to have a democracy, the whole idea is we got to have compromise. And of course, people are going to argue with each other and tussle. And you're going to basically, the best kind of political agreement is everybody's a little bit pissed off by it.
Yes.
Because
you can't make everybody happy.
Right. But the problem is, and I'm going to say this to the Republican Party, is the Republican Party got took over by the extremists, and it used to be the Republican Party, whilst they had their point of view, they agreed that this was the system, that we're going to tussle to get our point of view, and if we're in a majority, okay, but we still got to give the other side a little bit, blah, 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 blah. But now it's gotten to the point where if it's either our side wins or the other side is totally destroyed. And then the Democrats have to go, well, you got to step up and fight because you're not going to get anything. And so, eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, right?
Right.
There was a gentleman once, I do tour guiding here to make as a side business, and there was a gentleman who was a photographer, and I was taking him around Kyoto, and he was an American, and he was from California, but by Yosemite, rural guy. Mm-hmm. And this is during the Obama years, and he was a Tea Party guy.
Okay.
And so we're walking, and he's blah, blah, blah. We're walking down. Usually I try not to talk about politics when I'm working because that's just really bad economic sense, right? It's just like, okay, yeah, I think, But we're kind of an isolated spot. And he's rambling on about guns and Obama. And I was like, I just really couldn't take it anymore. And so I said, really? That's what you think about Mr. Obama? I'm surprised because I voted for him. I think he's like one of the best people one of the best presidents ever. And he was like, And then we had a conversation. I searched in the conversation and found a commonality.
Yeah.
So half of my existence is rural, and so I had guns and went deer hunting, and I just said and explained that. Yeah, well, I've gone deer hunting. I had a gun. I'm not just this pinko kami tree hugging, gay loving liberal.
Yeah.
I used to smoke dope, chew tobacco, listen to ACD, and shoot at deer, just like all the other guys in the small town I lived in did.
Mm-hmm.
All the guys, but
yeah.
And so I found this commonality, and we ended up having a conversation about that thing we had in common, including explaining the kind of gun I had and blah, 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 blah. And then I presented my point of view, which is like, if you're going to go deer hunting, do you really need military hardware? Isn't that pretty much like a wussy thing? I mean, really, do you need all that stuff to go hunting?
Mm-hmm.
I just had like a 30-30. Okay, mid-range gun. But I mean, really? What are you gonna need next? We're gonna have a grenade launcher too. That's gonna give you what, hamburger? And so he laughed at it, and then he realized that I'm a human being, he's a human being, and we talked about stuff, and we got to a point where we agreed to disagree, and we had a good time. But I found things that we had in common. And having lived overseas and traveled a lot, people are people.
Right.
People want the same things in their life. They want their kids to succeed. They want to be able to go to the doctor or what other healthcare person, and not go broke. And people want love in their life. People want to be respected. People want to be heard. They want to be heard.
Yes.
So that's just humans.
Yeah. You when you were talking about deer hunting, I grew up in a hunting family.
Okay.
And I have 4 brothers, and so, I mean, I grew up with guns. Yes. I also grew up in where hunting was not a sport.
Mm-hmm.
It was serious business. It was about putting food on the table.
Yeah.
And so, so when you're talking about deer hunting, I'm going, almost everybody that I know who are hunters are Republican. Almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them.
Sure.
And we've had that same kind of conversation. It's like, okay, you don't need the semi-automatic, really. I mean, I'm looking at one of my brothers. You really don't need the semi-automatic. I watched you with a .22. And it was still a good shot. So you can't tell me that having that different gun is going to make that big of a difference.
Although I have to say, hunting a deer with a .22, you got to be.
That's what I mean. And we did.
Sure. But you got to be a good shot because.
Yes. It's about shot placement.
Now, okay, so let me just jump in here. So some of this is very cultural.
Yes.
For our more urban listeners, they're going to be like shocked. Oh my God, this deer hunting and blah 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 blah. And there's a cultural difference. And so, for example, in a place like Wisconsin,
yes,
you have to have deer hunting. Why? Because there are no more predators left. And if you don't have the hunting, it keeps the herd in check. Because if you don't have the herd is going to collapse because they're going to starve because there's going to be too many of them. For example, this is one of the reasons.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is there's hunting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be this urban. I mean, I totally understand why firstly, with the politics, with people are voting.
Yeah.
In the States, about 45%, they're Republican. They identify with the Republican Party, and they wouldn't vote for a Democrat and ever. Just because. And then another 45% that identify with the Democrats and they wouldn't vote for a Republican
just because
they would never do it. Right. And then the choice in the States is that you get this or this. It's not a multi-party thing. You get 2 parties. All the other parties are pushed off to the side. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is, how it's set up. If you want to change it, that's great. But I don't know. That's a lot to change that system because it's embedded in it.
Well, I think that, okay, here's my thought on that one, is that if there's ever going to be a change and move away from a 2-party system, now is the time.
Yes, and that's the one thing, that's the thing about Trump, that he's breaking the old mold. I mean, of the positive, because there's always a positive to it. He's totally breaking the old mold, and there's a realignment going on because people are like, either they're going to one side or the other, because the old system was not working for a lot of people.
Well, and the thing is that those long those Republicans that have been a Republican their entire life don't recognize their own party anymore.
Yeah.
They don't, and my mom even said something to me the other day, because she and my dad were longtime Republicans up until Obama, and then they switched and actually voted Democrat. But what she was saying is that, she says, if your dad was alive, he would have a lot to say about this and about what the Republican Party looks like now. And she also said that, and this is how she feels, she said the last real war that was fought for democracy was World War II. And that's how they feel, because that's the era that they were young adults in, and my dad was a World War II veteran. And so there's that piece about the democracy, and so that is the topic that she talks about the most, is the loss, the losing of our democracy, something that cost many, many people's lives to fight for. Yeah.
Yes, and that's being challenged right now.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And and the thing is that I don't, here I am, the only one in my family would say this out loud, is like, but I don't think that any war is good. I mean, that's my
Okay, fair enough.
It's an economic situation is what it is.
Well,
the rich get richer, right?
Well, or politics is about power, right? Who has power, who wants power, and it's always political economy, right? Who has, the money goes with part of the power. And now we're getting to a point where that's a whole another
show.
Well, it's also the PhD dissertation. I think, though, I was reading about Sarah Silverman.
Oh, yeah.
She has this, and we didn't get, is it okay if we go till about 10-2?
Sure,
on the
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sarah Silverman is a New York Jewish comedian, all right? I think she's amazing. And one of her things is like, this screaming and yelling doesn't work. It's not, so a lot of comedians fall back, because especially toward the leftish side of the spectrum, a lot of the great comedians do in late night TV have, do your political jokes.
Right.
Her thing now is like, let's listen to the other people's point of view. Why is it that she's talking a lot about what we're talking about? That, for example, one thing I read, I haven't seen her TV show. It's on Hulu, and don't have that. But she was talking once about a guy who was like a troll, and was just like there is on the internet, people just sometimes just put this horrible stuff at her. Instead of just ignoring him or fighting back at him, she was just like asking him, why do you say this? She was genuinely wanted to know what his why he was saying what he was saying. She was asking his opinion, and nobody actually really had done that before. And then they were going back and forth, and basically it came out that he wasn't, what he was really angry about wasn't what he was talking about. Yeah. And there's a lot in psychology that there's something inside, but people just want to be heard. And so there's really something to be said about that, to listening to the other person's side. But the challenge is nowadays is some of the stuff that people are screaming at each other is just so bad, or not even just that. People just don't like during the last election, there's a lot of the expats that were Americans are very much Bernie Sanders supporters, and that's fine. But what I noticed was I appreciate the guy, but I just thought some of the stuff was unrealistic, considering that who's controlling Congress. How are you going to get free health care when you can't? How is this going to work? And so the thing was, I would get in a conversation. It's like, well, where are you going to get the money for this?
Right.
And then I would just get attacked by all sides, and it was like I was a horrible human being because I was questioning. I had a legitimate question.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't help democracy if we're just
disagree.
Yeah, no, villainizing anyone who disagrees with you even a little bit because you're not, in the like ideologically pure or whatever. So so the thing is it's still a question. I don't have an answer for it, but I think we really do need to find a way of how can we have sane conversations about what's going on without, totally judging everyone, especially when we're in an environment where there are people that's what they're doing. They're trying to separate us. They're trying to divide us. They're trying to make it, these are the white people over here. These are the black people over here. These are the natives over here. These are the Hispanics over here, and they should hate each other. And, half of the thing is when you hang out with people from different groups, Abdul is a good guy, I met him. He's really good. He's really working really hard to get his daughter in a good school. Just because he's Muslim and he prays 5 times a day doesn't mean he's a jihadi. I mean, most Muslims are not jihadis. Right. Most Muslims think the jihadis are horrible people. And extremists,
right? They're
but I mean, you can change the color and change the label, and most people I think are good people, but there are some that aren't, and we need to be aware of that and confront that. But
well, it's about, the question is how do you have a conversation with someone, because it's in the conversation that you close the gap, you close that divide, because you get to hopefully find out more about them in a way that makes them human. Now, there's a lot of us who would do that anyway, right? But how do you have a conversation with somebody who is so extremely different than you in the way they communicate? Right? That's the question. They may have completely different political views.
Well, one of the spiritual truths is you're not right. Right? I mean, the world is a complex place, and we are, everything is relative. It's relative from where our point of view. And if, I guess the whole thing is to set the example, one person at a time, not falling into the trap of, sitting around the table with the relatives at Thanksgiving time, and you got Uncle
Fester.
Uncle Fester, thank you. Uncle Fester at the end of the table spouting whatever vile that Rush Limbaugh spouted or whatever.
Right.
How do you handle that? Sometimes confrontation is good. Sometimes letting it go. But maybe asking a question. I try to get people to try not to talk in the vocabulary of to get people to speak regular English, because sometimes this is vocabulary. Like I was telling that woman was talking about Islamization, because this is just a key word to find out, are you on my side or are you on another side? Right. And so then we can find a way. Am I going to fight, or we're gonna like just agree with each other? It seems to be people seem to just want to find someone to agree with. Yeah. Because of course I'm always right.
There's a universal law somewhere about that.
What, that Paul's always right?
Why not?
Well, there was Ptolemy, where the Earth was the center and the planets went around. Then there's Copernicus, where, the sun was in the center and the planets went around. And then there's the Paul version where Paul's in the center.
I'm in the center. You're in the center.
The universe spins around me, yes.
I am the center of my universe, though.
Holocentric. Well, yes and no. I mean, as if everything, we're running out of time here. We could talk about this. So I guess
one of the things that I wanted to say is, because I've been kind of looking at the chat that's going on, and I want to thank those people who are making some really good comments here, and they're having a real conversation in the chat room about this, and I just wanted to thank them for their points of view and the understanding of that this political divisiveness, the social divide, all we can do is our own piece in it, right? Like you said, role modeling and If we try to be right about it, we're no different. We're no better than the person that's the troll.
Yes.
And so it really challenges, I think it challenges our spiritual beliefs. It challenges for us to use the tools that we have, our gifts that we came in with. And it actually challenges us to look at things from a wider perspective than a narrow one.
Thanks for sharing that. And I want to thank everybody in the comments. I can only focus on one thing at one time, so I'm just focusing on whoever I'm speaking with. But thanks everyone for your contributions. And I know you need to get going, Neshi. So
I just wanted to let people know why I'm cutting out early is because I have to run down the cyber hallway in Star Nations and produce Julie Hedges' show, the Tarot Journey, because she is in Florida. And she's doing her show from Florida, and so she needed a hand with producing.
Okay. All right. So, how can people contact you?
Well, they can contact me at starnationsorganization.org. We have a contact page there, and you can send me an email there. Or you can find me right here on Facebook, Yvette.
Okay. And I'm Paul Crouse. If you can contact me at paulcrouse.com. I'm here on Facebook. There are lots of Paul Crouses with a C. I'm not the guy with the fraud conviction in Florida. And I'm not selling used cars in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania either. Selling cars in Amish land. It's used cars in Amish land. Oh, that's a interesting business idea.
Hey, I interviewed somebody who was formerly Amish.
Formerly Amish.
Yes, it's a very interesting conversation. In fact, she's coming back probably more closer to the fall to have another discussion. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks everybody for listening. And catch you on the flip side. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Why can't we all just get along? All right.
Right. Exactly.
What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Thanks, Elvis.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.